How's it going, YouTube? Banned Booktuber here, and I'm finally back. I know, it has taken so long, and I do apologize for that, but I'm finally back with my very first book review, very first banned book review, that is, and that is on George Orwell's 1984. 84. No, I really enjoyed it. The ironic part, it's called 1984, but it was actually published in 1948 or 49. Don't quote me on that. It was one of those 2 years. But as you know, I think that was during like the Cold War time, and a lot of the themes in this book are kind of anti-communism, anti-war, and things like that. So it got banned in the USSR. It was actually burned there, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. So that's why it was banned, and I hope to do that with all the books that I review. I will try to do some research and see why they were banned, just because I do need to make sure that they were banned or censored at one point in time, because that is what I'm doing my reviews on, banned books. It was a really good book. I enjoyed it, and I'm not just saying that because I'm doing a review on it. I actually did enjoy it, and I would tell you if I didn't. But so 1984 takes place in, obviously, in 1984, and it is a dystopian society, and the government system is totalitarian, and main character is Winston Smith, and he lives in this crazy upside down society where basically the main group or the main governing body is called the party, and the main figurehead of the party is Big Brother. And so the party's slogan is Big Brother's always watching, and that's kind of where they got this crazy little eye from. It's really creepy. Big Brother, or the party, they have these things called like telescreens in everyone's living quarters, and they basically are able to see your every movement. They're able to hear everything you say, so nothing is private in this society. It's really, really weird. But the book is broken up into 3 parts, part 1, part 2, and part 3, obviously. And in part 1, we are introduced to our main character, who is Winston Smith. And in this part of the book, we kind of get an idea of how the party is structured and Winston's overall thoughts towards the party and towards Big Brother, and how he thinks that this society is really crazy, yet he cannot voice his opinion because the party basically commands complete conformity. If any thoughts or actions deviate from the norm, you're basically killed in this society, which is crazy. And so that's part 1. We are introduced into the mind of Winston Smith, and the things that the party says is normal, he thinks that is completely nuts, and if you read it, it is. And then in part 2, we are introduced to Winston's love interest. So yes, there is a love interest in this book, which, is always a plus. Every book needs a love interest, I think, except textbooks. Textbooks don't have a love interest, and maybe that's why they're so boring. We're introduced to Winston's love interest, Julia. And so the whole thing about part 2 is we kind of see their relationship, and that's pretty cool. And then in part 3, we get to the falling action, I would say, as far as how the plot goes. This is falling action because it is the end of the book, obviously. And then there is the resolution, if you want to call it a resolution. But yeah, so the parts are kind of paced differently. So part 1 goes really slow, and I did find myself pretty bored during part 1. But part 2 and part 3, they do pick up, and it does get pretty good. So I did enjoy that. So George Orwell, he does go into several different themes in the book. Majority of them are focused on like warfare, power, the dangers of this totalitarian society, because you got to keep in mind, when this book was written, this was like during like Cold War time frame, so that those are themes that he did focus on heavily, because he was trying to convey that message, I think. Philosophical ideas are all touched on in this book. And I think that's what surprised me most about this book. It really gets you thinking. I found myself like questioning a lot of things, not in a bad way, but it actually got me thinking like, whoa, like what if, that was to happen or this was to happen. And I think that's what George Orwell was trying to accomplish, which he really did. Overall, I would say the book was a 3.5 star, and I'm only saying that because it was more of an advanced read that I would have anticipated. I'm used to reading a lot of YA. That was what I was reading before I decided to take this plunge into banned books. So it was a new type of read for me, and maybe that's why I couldn't rate it as high as I would have wanted, just because a lot of the things did go above my head. And I'm not ashamed, but that's why I do want to read it again in the future when I have matured more as a reader. And so I do look forward to that. Yeah, overall, it was a really good book, and I would recommend it. Not only that, it attacks really hard topics also, but it does so in a way that is enjoyable, and that's what I liked. Yeah, that is my very first unofficial review of George Orwell's 1984. If you guys have any recommendations as far as books I should read next, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll make sure to add it to my list of books to read. Yeah, thank you guys so much, and until next time, keep reading.